Hello and welcome to the Al Monitor Brief. It's Monday, October 7th. I'm Kristen Tolman. It's been 1 year since October 7th, when the region was changed as we knew it. Today's main segment is split into two. One conversation with Al Monitor's Israel editor Rina Bassist, and another with Daoud Kuttab, Al Monitor's Palestine columnist. Both will touch on how their communities have faced the past year. In Gaza, 41,870 Palestinians have died. More than half of the homes have been damaged or destroyed. Strikes by the Israeli military continue, with aerial, land, and maritime bombardments across the Gaza Strip, resulting in civilian casualties, displacement, and the destruction of residential structures and public infrastructure. According to the UN, at least 1.9 million people, or about 90% of the population, across the Gaza Strip are internally displaced. Many have been displaced repeatedly, some 10 times or more. Over 10,000 American-made 2,000-pound bombs have been sent from Washington to Israel for its war efforts. In Israel, the lives of nearly 1,200 people brutally murdered by Hamas on October 7th continue to be mourned. While 251 hostages were taken by Hamas on October 7th, 97 of them are still in Gaza. The October 7th attack was the bloodiest in Israel's history. Israeli President Herzog began the day with a moment of silence at 6:29 a.m., the exact time the attack began, at Kibbutz Rim, the site of the Nova Music Festival, where at least 370 people were killed by heavily armed Hamas fighters in the deadliest attack that day. In the city of Tel Aviv this morning, families of hostages and supporters rallied before dawn to call for the return of their loved ones, holding banners and placards bearing their pictures. October 7th changed the Middle East as the world knew it. Many in the international community began learning about the days, weeks, and decades before October 7th, diving into books, videos, and conversations that explored the reality for millions before the dreadful day last October. There has been renewed calls for a two-state solution based on the UN partition plan from 1947, which called for the creation of a Jewish state alongside a Palestinian state. Diplomatic pressure on Israel has grown as the battle with Hamas hits its 1-year anniversary. The UN General Assembly voted by a significant margin in May to grant new rights and privileges to Palestine, and a sign of growing international support for a vote on full voting membership, while Spain, Ireland, and Norway formally recognized a Palestinian state in May, joining a growing list of 140 countries. In recent weeks, Israel's war efforts and focus have shifted to Lebanon, where airstrikes have given way to a fast-expanding ground incursion against Hezbollah militants who have fired rockets into Israel since the Gaza war began. A growing list of Hezbollah officials, including the group's longtime leader Hassan Nasrallah, have been killed by Israel. Hundreds of Hezbollah members were killed or maimed in explosions of pagers and walkie-talkies. Israel's ground invasion is its first in Lebanon since a month-long war in 2006, while thousands are now displaced across the country, moving north. Without diplomatic solutions, the fighting is likely to persist. Let's turn now to Rina and Daoud to understand how their communities have grappled with the war over the past year. Hi, Daoud. Welcome to the Al Monitor Brief.
Thank you very much.
So, Daoud, you wrote a piece in Al Monitor that came out yesterday on Sunday, looking at how a year on from October 7th, what the path forward looks like for the Palestinian community. Can you walk us through a little bit about what was laid out in your interview with the ex-Palestinian FM, Kidwa?
Well, Nasser Kudwa is a former foreign minister, and he's also a nephew of the late Yasser Arafat, a very prominent, well-respected Palestinian who was also the ambassador at the UN, but who has lately been, let's say, ostracized from the mainline PLO group because his own movement asked him to leave or forced him to leave after he ran kind of an alternative list, which in elections had never happened. Anyway, Nasser Kudway and the former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, apparently were in some kind of a conference together with Tom Friedman, and they seem to have hit it well between them. And so they decided to come up with a kind of a joint program or roadmap for how to get out of the big mess we're all in. And so that was published, and he appeared on CNN and so on. And so I decided to interview him separately because also he was attacked a lot. And he tried to explain his position. I thought he did a good job in trying to lay out why he did what he did and how he was taking things from there.
Yeah, and what is this plan that they see as a potential way forward?
Well, it's not. There's nothing extremely new in it. What is new is that they actually came up with this plan and that they signed on to it and that they believe in it. But it's not. There's nothing that nobody has tried before. The problem is there has never been any real effort behind this. We all know that there's no way around one of two solutions. Either you share the power, in other words, two states. Share the power, in other words, one state where everybody has the same equal rights, or you share the land. And for the most part, the world has always taken the last idea, which is a two-state solution. Mm-hmm. And that's the most reasonable and possible solution that there exists, There's too much blood between Israelis and Palestinians, so let's kind of create two separate states where each state is responsible for its own security and management and commitment to protecting the other side from the other side, from radicals on both sides. Mm-hmm. So, but I think what is interesting is the timing and membership, the fact that you have two senior Israelis and Palestinians who are willing to go against the trend of their own movement or their own people by taking a chance on each other and on a solution that most of us in the world know that there's not going to be a disappearance of the Palestinians. There's not going to be a disappearance of the Israelis. There's no magic solution. The only solution that can exist is for us to find something that we can live with. And the two-state solution, in other words, a Palestinian state, independent alongside of Israel. And on the issue of Jerusalem, which is probably the most difficult one, they came up with some interesting ideas that fit what Olmert had said when he was prime minister, what President Clinton said when he was U.S. president. There's, different possibilities for solving the issue of Jerusalem, which is the hardest one to solve. But other than that, there's general agreement on what issues need to be done. What we've had a problem with is there has not been any courage by political leaders inside, outside, in the U.S. and so on, to push through a solution. And what we've seen since October 7th is that an absence of a political horizon, people do things that are crazy. And so now, Palestinians did something that, some call it courageous, some call it terrorist, whatever. And the Israelis have done, 10 or 1,000 times worse to the Palestinians. And so, you can keep killing each other, but that doesn't bring about the solution. And what's the problem with the Israelis now is that they have no exit plan. They entered Gaza, they're entering Lebanon, but they have no plans. Now they're trying to kind of fight with the Iranians. There has to be a political plan alongside the military. You cannot have a military solution to a conflict that includes people, includes ideologies that are different. The only solution is a political one. Yeah. And the military has the limit of what it can do.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's why, you say this isn't a revolutionary idea that they're putting forward. My real question is, do they have any power or ability to sway groups within within the Palestinian factions and within the Israeli establishment to get on board with any of this, or do you think it's just revolutionary that they're able to talk in the first place?
I honestly don't think the Israelis or the Palestinians can solve that problem. The problem has to in a way, be forced on us, both Israelis and Palestinians. The international community has played a big role. President Biden has been giving weapons to Israel while talking about two-state solution. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So you need external powers to work with both sides. Now, what this plan does, it shows that there is a possibility. That there are leaders who are willing to put on paper and sign their name to a plan. It's not perfect. It's not going to please everybody. But there are ideas that can be built on. So, if I was president of the U.S., I would invite Olmert and Nasser to the White House or to the, to the Elysee in Paris or to 10 Downing Street and give these ideas some air and let people see there is hope, because the problem we have is that people act in a very radical way when there's no hope.
Yeah.
And what this idea does more than anything else is it gives a little slimmer hope that there is a possibility. There are things we can do that are short of just killing each other.
Yeah. Something I'm curious about on the Palestinian side, is there a certain international actor that could be a facilitator? Because in some ways, Washington isn't a nonpartisan actor, right? They're giving billions in arms to Israel. They might not seem like a good faith actor to Palestinians. Is it maybe Beijing, or who could? Is there a country that could maybe be the international actor to forge?
Well, yeah, of course there are countries, and there's UN, and there's a Security Council. The problem is not on the Palestinian side. The problem is on the Israeli side. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who have an occupation that has gone on for too long, and the siege has gone on too long, and now this revenge war has gone on too long. So, the Israelis are the ones who control the army, and they can withdraw the army if they decide, and that ends the occupation. So I think you need to work more on the U.S. Other countries will come along, will support a reasonable solution, and if need be, they can press each side. But it's the Americans and the Israelis, this holy or unholy alliance that at the same time, as the New York Times writer today said, Biden is given all the right words, but he's also given all the weapons. So you cannot have weapons and talk about peace at the same time. You have to either get the other side to listen to you, if you're giving them money and weapons and political support, or you have to stop feeding them with, keep like it's an addict. You keep giving them, empowering them. They're never going to end their addiction. So there is an addict in the region called Israel, and it needs to be, you need cold turkey. You need to stop them from this addiction, and the only side that can do that is Americans. But yes, the Palestinians want somebody else, but nobody has the kind of clout on Israel except for the U.S.
Yeah, right, exactly. No one has that amount of power. Okay, my last question, Daoud, really is, a year on from October 7th, how has the Palestinian community, society, changed, and what's a collective, is there even hope or vision left, do you think, for Palestinians?
Well, there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of anger in many places. There's anger at the Arabs for not doing enough. There's anger at the Americans for empowering Israel. There's anger at the human rights movement for not doing enough to stop human rights violations. There's a lot of anger right now. And so if I would describe the situation, I would just say it's extreme anger, not just anger and frustration, and there's lack of hope. And so we saw October 7th coming out of lack of hope. If we don't give Palestinians the political horizon, this is the thing, there's going to be people who are going to act without hope. And that's the scary part. The scary part is that people, when they lose interest in their own lives, they see life not meaning anything, they will do crazy things. And so what everybody needs to do is to give people hope. There needs to be a political horizon that allows people to see hope, to see the possibilities of a solution. And this is why I was interested in talking to Nasser, because he gave that little glimmer of hope. Here we are, two men, Israeli and Palestinian leaders or ex-leaders, who can see some light at the end of the tunnel, and that's what we need. We need hope.
Yeah. All right, Daoud, thank you so much for bringing us up to the minute. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Hi, Rina. Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Hello, Kristen. Happy to be back.
So, Rina, as today we mark the 1-year anniversary of October 7th, when hundreds were brutally murdered across southern Israel and hundreds taken hostage, how is Israeli society coping with the anniversary?
I would say that if you compare what happened on October 7th to other conflicts, either the what we had in Gaza in 2014 or even the Second Lebanon War in 2006, October 7 was very different. And why was it so different? Because it touched personally, I think, really every Israeli. When you talk to Israelis, you can see there is nobody that didn't know someone that was affected by October 7. Everybody knew somebody that was either killed or kidnapped or evacuated from the south of Israel. Everybody either had somebody in the family that was mobilized. You remember that after October 7, 300,000 young people, men and women, aged 21 to 45, were mobilized to fight in Gaza and on the other fronts. So October 7 really touched very, very personally and very directly every Israeli citizen. And so the mourning, I think, today on October 7 is not just a national mourning. We're not just mourning these people as a nation, but also each and one and every us is mourning somebody, a friend, a colleague at work, a family member. It's really a very difficult feeling.
Right. Yeah. Something I'm curious about is this morning, Mazal, one of the columnists at Al Monitor for the Israel Pulse, wrote about how a year ago there was division within Israel in relation to movements happening politically in the country. But that changed so much over the past year. I'm curious, what has changed for the political apparatus since October 7th, and what are the effects that have played out over the past year?
Yes, we can talk about two things that happened, actually, because you're absolutely correct, Kristen, that the year before October 7 marked an enormous divide within Israeli society. Those who were supporting the initiative of the Netanyahu government for the judicial reform, and those opposing this reform, claiming that it was eroding Israeli democracy. Which was very, very difficult for many people, not just from the left, but also from the center, and even some people from the Israeli right. So we arrived at October 7 already extremely divided as a nation, and I think October 7 brought about two processes, if we can say that. First of all, there were great demonstrations of solidarity. This divide has been put aside. You know that October 7 was also marked by an extreme failure by the Israeli government, by its military, by its intelligence to foil this terrible attack by Hamas. In a way that brought about this solidarity of people stepping in where there was a vacuum, where the government was not functioning, to help the people evacuated, even to fight instead of the army, which found itself extremely disorganized on that terrible day. So people just took their arms, volunteered, went to the kibbutzim, to the moshavim, to the cities that were attacked to help, to try to save these people from the Hamas attackers. So and after that, after October 7, we saw enormous gestures of solidarity of people bringing food and clothing and toys, housing people in their own homes. These people who lost everything that terrible day. So we saw that phenomena of fabulous, fantastic solidarity between all the people of Israel, regardless of faith, regardless of of political opinions, right, left, people living in Tel Aviv, in the north, everybody coming together. But on the other hand, the more time went on, and the feeling was growing that Mr. Netanyahu was not doing enough to bring about the hostages, then of course the political cleavage and also the feelings of despair of the families of the hostages grew. And we are now in a situation that, on the other hand, we share this enormous pain. And I think that Israeli society, it will take many, many years to heal from this terrible pain. On the other side, it's also a society extremely cleavaged and divided between those supporting the goal of Mr. Netanyahu to defeat Hamas at any price and those calling for an agreement that would see the liberation of the hostages and, of course, a ceasefire in Gaza at any price.
Yeah. I mean, it seems in some ways that now, something I'm curious about, there was a few months ago, there was, as you mentioned, many protests that erupted against Netanyahu, that it didn't seem like there was a way to end the war in Gaza. But now with Gideon Sa'ar joining the coalition, it seems like maybe Netanyahu's power is balanced out. And maybe he's won back over, right? So people who were hesitant, especially with some recent Israeli successes, you could say, with in the north with Hezbollah, with the pager attack. I mean, how do you see Netanyahu's power and hold in Israeli society now?
You know, there is still a big debate in Israel over the responsibility of the government for what happened on October 7 and the calls for establishing a commission of inquiry that would investigate what the government did and did not know on that terrible day and in the weeks and the months that before that led to the attack of Hamas. But it's also true what you are saying, that with time we see that the narrative put in place by Netanyahu and by his associates, mostly those of the far right, distancing themselves from that responsibility. This narrative is growing. He succeeds in putting it in place, so to say. And it's also true that after October 7, the popularity of Mr. Netanyahu was very, very low. And in fact, he was forced to bring into his government Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot to propose to them to be part of the war cabinet, just to gain the credibility in the eyes of the Israelis to launch this war against Hamas. But as of June, we all know, Mr. Gantz and Benny Eisenkot are no longer part of neither of the war cabinet nor of the coalition of Mr. Netanyahu. And the reason for that is that the Netanyahu government had presented no plan for the day after the war. So we are in a situation, I think, of that many people in Israel, at least more people than what we saw after October 7, do not feel that we can talk about the day after the war. They support the goal set by Mr. Netanyahu to eliminate all the military and governmental capacities of the Hamas before going any further, before thinking about the day after in Gaza.
Yeah, that brings me to really my last question. Which is catching up to the current moment. Now the Northern Front in Lebanon has opened while the war in Gaza still goes forward. Is there a sense from leadership of how this is done moving forward, or how the war is now on two fronts, and some might argue others could come to an end, or is there really not a plan in place?
would say we spoke earlier about the opposition within the Israeli government to Netanyahu's goal of eliminating the military capabilities of Hamas, and there are many people who are not going along with this policy, with this approach of Mr. Netanyahu. But the situation, when you look at the north of Israel, I think the approach of the Israeli society is different. At least polls are showing that between 50 and 60% of the Israeli population supports continuing the ground inclusion into Lebanon. And why is that? It's mostly because the conflict with Hezbollah is not something new. True, the attacks, the rocket fire and the missile fire against Israel from Lebanese soil have increased tremendously since October 8th, when Hassan Nasrallah, the chief of Hezbollah, decided to join forces with Hamas. But Hezbollah has been firing at the north of Israel, at the kibbutzim, at the villages in the near the frontier of Lebanon for many, many years, since the 2006 second Lebanon war. So there is a rather significant majority, I think, within the Israeli society that feel that the time has come to deal seriously with this issue, with this, continuous attacks by Hamas. And contrary to what is going on in Gaza, I think Netanyahu also sees that the people, in a certain way, are with him on that issue.
Right. Yeah, there will be, healing for Israeli society and change to come for many years, I'm sure. Rina, thank you so much for keeping us up to the minute. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kristen.
That's it for today, Monday, October 7th. You can read all these stories and more impacting the region on allmonitor.com.